delighted to say right now that Eylon Levy joins us. He's a former Israeli government spokesman. He's also host of Israel, the State of a Nation podcast. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's extraordinary, actually, 2 calls we've just had, and quite much. The messages actually seem to be coming in on Twitter and on text, very supportive of what Israel is doing right now in Lebanon. Very critical, though, it appears, certainly the phone calls we've taken so far, what you had to do. But I always ask people, like, do you support Israel's offensive in Lebanon? If people don't, what they expect Israel to do when they are being fired on by Hezbollah. Do you believe that what Israel has done is a reasonable and proportionate response? Other people are claiming it's a war crime.
Yeah, you're right, Julia. Many of the people who criticize Israel's military actions to defend its people really don't want it to do anything. For many of Israel's critics, the only thing we can do that would be justified is to roll over and die, and clearly that's not an option. Let's remember, Israel has been under attack from Lebanon since October 8th. The day after Hamas's October 7th massacre, Iran's proxy army in Lebanon joined in the fight. It's fired over 9,000 rockets at northern Israel. It's displaced tens of thousands of people in the north of the country. They can't go home. Their homes are being bombed. And what Israel is trying to do now is to get our people back to their homes. That's the first duty of any country, to make sure people can sleep safely in their beds, to make sure Hezbollah's rocket fire stops, and that this illegal Iranian proxy army backs off from the border, as the UN says it's meant to do, but has never done anything to make it do that.
I mean, I've got to be honest with you, I pretty much write off people who have an issue with attacks on Hezbollah militants, exploding pagers and walkie-talkies, or indeed attacks specifically targeting Hezbollah commanders, given that these are people who have orchestrated massacres on a grand scale again and again and again. The world, as far as I'm concerned, is a better place. I absolutely cheered, and it wasn't champagne. It was a good cup of tea, though, on Saturday morning when I found out that the leader of Hezbollah had actually been taken out, Hassan Nasrallah. But there are concerns perfectly reasonable people will have about attacks on, missile attacks going into, Beirut. It's a very built-up area, apartment blocks being hit and the like. You've got targets Israel wants to hit, but there are also innocent people who've got nothing to do with this fight who are also going to die or be wounded. What do you say to that?
You're absolutely right. No one denies the situation is horrible, and Israel has spent the best part of the last year trying to avoid this. Hezbollah started shooting rockets, and every day since then, Israel has been warning Hezbollah has got to back off or we will have to push it away. We are now exactly in a scenario we didn't want to be in and we tried to avoid. But Hezbollah, just like its ally Hamas in Gaza, has deliberately designed the battlefield to hide its military infrastructure under civilian buildings, thinking it's going to keep their terrorists safe. No one is disputing the fact that Hezbollah HQ was located under civilian buildings right next to schools and UN facilities. And they did that to say, look, the price of getting to us is unfortunately to go through the civilians above ground. And I'm angry at them. I'm angry at what they are doing to our neighbors. And I expect one day we'll come together to grieve what the Islamic Republic of Iran has brought on us. But Hezbollah is shooting rockets at northern Israel. There are people in Israel who have been homeless for a year. Their homes are being bombed. I was up in northern Israel just earlier this week. There are houses that have been gutted by rocket fire from Hezbollah. We need to get people home, and it is Hezbollah that has decided that it's hiding behind civilians. And the best we can do is to follow the laws of war in trying to use precise munitions and urging people to get out of the way.
I was going to say, Israel has done that. These warnings have gone out. Yeah. We are going to be bombing this area. You need to get out of the way. That said, I think a lot of people weren't expecting there to be bombing in Beirut itself. But here's the thing. Lots of people are concerned that tanks being amassed on the border, we could be looking at all-out war. And again, it seems to me Israel already feels like it is in an all-out war. Enemies on 2 sides there. But this idea that Iran could step up, how significant has been the Israeli taking out of the likes of Hassan Nasrallah? I think certainly most people in Britain will have no idea the significance of this man. He is a huge figure. He's been in power for, 30 years, leading Hezbollah. This is a man who had a huge influence in the Arab world. And, these sort of 5 days of national mourning, in Iran and places like that. How worried are you that Iran will no longer fight through its proxies, whether it's Hamas, Hezbollah or Houthi rebels, but will actually consider going to war with Israel itself?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Look, this is not a war on 2 fronts. It's a war on 7. Hamas declared war on Israel on October 7th. The next day, its allies Hezbollah in Lebanon joined the war. The Houthis in Yemen have been shooting rockets and drones. I've had to run to a rocket shelter because of a missile from Yemen. How crazy is that? Terror attacks from the West Bank, drones from Syria, rockets from Iraq, and attacks from Iran itself. Israel is fighting for its life against the Iranian regime and its proxy armies on 7 fronts. And what it has been able to do in the last few weeks is nothing short of extraordinary. It has decapitated the whole of Hezbollah's leadership. All of its commanders are now gone. They're sitting somewhere down in hell looking up and saying, wow, joining this war to try to save Yahya Sinwar and Hamas after October 7th was probably a very big mistake. Oops. Israel, if it was Israel, in an extraordinary James Bond kind of operation, managed to make thousands of pages explode in terrorists' hands as they were holding them up to their faces, has managed to launch targeted strikes against Hezbollah's missiles in order to massively deplete them. Hezbollah is no longer the terrorist army that it was on October 7th. It has been massively degraded. I really hope we don't get into a full ground operation. The results would be horrible if this war escalates, but we are already in a war. We're already in a war.
I mean, I think that's one of the key things, isn't it? Really good to talk to you. Time is against us. Eylon Levy, we'll have to leave it there. Former Israeli government spokesman, is also host of a podcast, Israel, State of a Nation.